Please, sir, my mom is very sick. Her voice was thin, trembling, but sharp enough to cut through the sound of rain pounding on the pavement. A small figure stood drenched beside a sleek black car, worth more than every house on the block combined. Adrian Vega didn't even lift his eyes from the glowing screen of his phone. His thumbs kept moving, answering an email about an oil deal in Houston. "Kid, go find your father, all right?" he muttered, bored. "I don't have one," she said without hesitation. "It's just my mom and me. She can't breathe right. I just need help to take her to a doctor. I swear I'm not lying." The rain had been falling since dawn, one of those gray storms that seemed to wash the soul out of the city. Adrian, CEO of one of the most powerful investment firms in North America, had just left an exclusive restaurant after lunch. Mondays he always drove himself. To feel human, he used to joke. But the truth was, he hadn't felt human in years. Slowly he turned his head. The girl couldn't have been more than 9. She wore a faded hoodie 2 sizes too big, sneakers with holes in the toes, and her dark hair was plastered against her cheeks. Her eyes were enormous, eyes that held no tears, just urgency and dignity. "And what exactly do you want from me?" he asked, lowering the window a few inches. "A few dollars, enough for a taxi, or some medicine." Adrian laughed, a cold, dry sound. He glanced around as if searching for a hidden camera. "That's the best line you've got? My mom is sick? Kid, you should write telenovelas." She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared. Adrian pulled a crumpled $100 bill from his wallet and tossed it through the gap. It landed in a puddle at her feet. "There, buy yourself a movie ticket about your sad life. Maybe you'll win an Oscar." He hit the gas. Water splashed onto her shoes as the car shot forward. And that should have been the end. But it wasn't. 2 hours later, on his way back to his penthouse in Uptown, the traffic froze, some protest blocking the main avenue. Annoyed, Adrian turned into narrower streets he'd never normally drive through. On a cracked corner, beside a lot piled with trash, something forced him to stop. It was her, the same girl. She was crouched beside the open door of a battered white van with broken windows taped with plastic. Inside, on a filthy mattress, a thin woman struggled for air. Her chest rose and fell in desperate jerks. Empty bottles, rags, and a jar without a label sat in a bucket nearby. The girl pressed a wet cloth against her mother's forehead, then reached into a plastic bag holding a piece of stale bread and half a bottle of soda. Adrian froze. He parked further down the block, killed the engine, and watched. He didn't get out. He didn't move. He just watched. And he watched longer than he wanted, because the girl didn't cry. She didn't panic. She worked as if she'd done it 1,000 times, as if she didn't expect the world to change, just hoped to hold it together a little longer. That night, back in his glass-walled apartment with a glass of $100 wine in hand, Adrian couldn't focus. He skimmed through emails, reviewed a presentation for Middle Eastern investors, ignored a message from his ex-wife about custody schedules, and another from his assistant reminding him of Thursday's gala dinner. None of it mattered. The image of the girl kept returning, sharper than any spreadsheet, heavier than any market collapse. It wasn't his responsibility, he told himself. He couldn't carry every tragedy he saw on the street. He gave millions every year to charities. Schools carried his name. His foundation funded scholarships across the country. He wasn't a monster, but still, the pressure in his chest wouldn't leave. The following morning, Adrian summoned a private investigator. He gave him the rough location of the van. Within 3 hours, a report landed on his desk. Her name was Lucia Morales, 9 years old. Not enrolled in school for 3 years. Her mother, Mariana Torres, 37, once a street vendor, now living in that abandoned van. No relatives, no government aid, and worst of all, Mariana suffered from chronic respiratory failure, now worsened by untreated pneumonia. Without immediate medical care, she might not survive the month. Adrian dropped the file on his desk. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't label. Guilt, rage, fear, all of them tangled inside his chest. He stared at the city skyline through the rain-speckled glass. And for the first time in his life, the numbers on the stock ticker running across his giant screen didn't mean a thing. "Prepare the SUV," he told his driver. His voice shook slightly. "And call Dr. Alvarez. Tell him we're making a house call tonight. Discreet." The The gray SUV rolled quietly through side streets that evening, avoiding the main roads. Adrian sat in the back seat with a box on his lap, bandages, vitamins, bottled water, fresh clothes for a child. His heartbeat thudded harder than the rain on the windows. When they reached the abandoned van, the headlights washed over the cracked metal. Lucia was inside, sitting cross-legged beside her mother. The woman's breaths were shallow, rattling. Lucia held a damp rag in her small hands, pressing it to her mother's forehead with desperate precision. She didn't notice Adrian at first. Only when he stepped forward and said her name, softly, like he had rehearsed, did she lift her head. Her huge eyes widened, filled with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. Adrian set the box down by the door. His throat was dry. "I came to help." "Why?" Her voice cracked. He swallowed. "Because I was wrong, and because I can." Lucia hesitated. She looked at the box, then at his tailored coat, his polished shoes soaked in mud. Finally, she moved aside just a little. Adrian knelt, feeling the damp ground seep into his pants. Up close, Mariana looked worse. Her lips were blue, skin stretched tight over bones. Each breath sounded like sandpaper tearing through her lungs. Behind him, Dr. Alvarez entered, carrying an oxygen tank and a small kit. He glanced at Adrian once, confused, but said nothing. "She needs oxygen immediately," the doctor murmured after examining her. "And antibiotics. If we don't move her tonight, she won't make it until morning." Lucia's hands trembled. She gripped her mother's wrist as if it could vanish. "You can save her?" The doctor hesitated. Adrian cut in. "We'll do everything. Tonight." He pulled out his phone. "Bring the ambulance. Quiet. No logos." Minutes later, sirens didn't wail, but headlights cut through the darkness. Two paramedics slid Mariana carefully onto a stretcher. Lucia clung to her mother's side. "I'm coming too," the girl demanded. "Of course," Adrian said. His voice had never sounded so certain. At the hospital, a private suite had already been cleared. White walls, fresh sheets, the hum of machines. Lucia stayed glued to her mother's hand until the staff gently pulled her away to place tubes and monitors. Adrian crouched beside her in the waiting room. The sterile air smelled of antiseptic and money. Screens flashed muted news reports on the wall. But Lucia stared only at the floor, arms wrapped tight around herself. "You'll leave again, won't you?" she asked suddenly, not meeting his eyes. Adrian felt his chest tighten. "No, I'll stay." She looked at him, searching for lies. "Why are you doing all this?" Adrian exhaled, lowering himself into the chair beside her. The truth rose like a tide he couldn't stop. "Because once, I had a daughter your age." Lucia's gaze sharpened. "She isn't with me anymore," he continued, his voice rough. "And there isn't a day I don't wish I had done more for her. When I saw you, when I saw your mother, I couldn't ignore it. Not again." Lucia blinked slowly. Then, without a word, she rested her head against his sleeve. Adrian froze, unprepared for the weight of that small trust. For once, silence didn't suffocate him. It healed. Hours passed. Doctors came and went. Mariana was stabilized with oxygen, antibiotics coursing through her veins. Her condition was critical, but no longer hopeless. At dawn, Adrian arranged a temporary apartment nearby for Lucia, with a caretaker and all the comforts he thought a child might want. But when he told her, she shook her head. "I won't leave my mom." Adrian paused. Then he made another call. "Prepare the room next door. Fill it with books, toys, whatever a 9-year-old needs." By afternoon, a second room bloomed with color. Lucia finally smiled, small, reluctant, but real. Adrian watched her trace the spines of storybooks with her fingers, then climb into a bed with clean sheets. And for the first time in years, he felt something stronger than profit margins, stronger than fear. He felt alive. The hospital had its own rhythm, machines humming, nurses rushing, lights never dimming. Adrian visited every evening, slipping past reception with quiet determination. The staff already knew his face, but they no longer looked at him as the untouchable millionaire in tailored suits. Something about his presence had changed. Lucia began waiting for him each night in the playroom, where puzzles and coloring books scattered the tables. She rarely smiled, but she was there, trust forming grain by grain, like sand in an hourglass. One evening, Adrian found her bent over a jigsaw puzzle, Most of it was complete except for two missing pieces. She frowned, searching the floor. "Need help?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Lucia shook her head. "They're gone. Maybe forever." "Sometimes pieces show up when you stop looking," he said softly. She turned her gaze on him. "Has that happened to you?" Adrian hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. You." Her cheeks colored faintly. She didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. Later, they sat outside Mariana's room. Through the glass, her mother lay breathing steadily, oxygen mask fogging with each inhale. Adrian caught Lucia's tense stare. "She's getting better," he assured her. "You promise?" "Yes," he swallowed. "She's stronger than we think." The girl leaned back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. After a long silence, she whispered, "Everyone says rich people don't care, that they only help when cameras are around. Why are you different?" Adrian stared at the sterile floor tiles. His pulse throbbed. "Because once, I cared too late." Her head tilted. "What do you mean?" Adrian's throat tightened, words scraped out like gravel. "My daughter. She would be your age now. I buried myself in work, in money, thinking it would all be waiting. But she's gone. Nothing I built could bring her back." Lucia's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she slipped her small hand into his, surprising him with the warmth. "Then maybe this time you can do it right." The weight of that sentence anchored itself in Adrian's chest. That night, as they left the ward for the cafeteria, he asked softly, "Lucia, what's the one thing you want most right now?" She looked up, solemn. "Just save my mom." Her words struck him harder than any boardroom negotiation, harder than any billion-dollar loss. For the first time, Adrian realized this wasn't charity. This was a responsibility. A second chance life had thrown into his path, one he dared not waste. Days blurred together. Adrian juggled calls with lawyers, meetings with doctors, and endless hours by Lucia's side. He stopped attending the galas, the banquets, the investor breakfasts. His calendar shrank to a single priority: Mariana's recovery. It wasn't long before whispers began. Colleagues noticed his absence. Reporters sniffed out rumors. A man like Adrian didn't just vanish from the city's spotlight without raising questions. But for once, Adrian Vega didn't care what the world thought. He only cared about the girl who clutched his sleeve when thunder rattled the hospital windows, and the woman whose life now balanced on the thin oxygen tube humming beside her bed. And maybe, just maybe, about the man he was slowly becoming. Question for you, watching this right now. If you were in Adrian's place, what would you do? Would you risk your reputation, your money, even your career, just to save a stranger? Tell us in the comments. Mariana's condition stabilized after 2 weeks of intensive care. She could finally sit up in bed, her frail body wrapped in blankets, her voice still faint but stronger than before. When Adrian entered the room one evening, carrying a bag of fresh fruit, she looked up at him with a tired smile. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You don't know us. Why do you keep coming?" Adrian placed the bag on the nightstand and sat in the chair beside her. "Because sometimes life gives us choices that make no sense. Choices of the heart, not the head." Mariana lowered her eyes, lips trembling. "I have nothing to repay you with." "I'm not asking for repayment," he said softly. "I just want you to live, for Lucia." Her eyes filled, and she turned her face to the window, embarrassed by tears. Adrian glanced at Lucia, who stood in the corner clutching a sketchbook. She had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. "Is that us?" he asked, smiling. She nodded shyly. "Yes, but you're smiling here. You never smile in real life." Adrian chuckled, a sound unfamiliar even to himself. "Maybe I should practice." Life inside the hospital grew into a routine. Mornings with doctors, afternoons in the playroom, evenings spent talking softly with Lucia about school, books, and sometimes about nothing at all. But outside those walls, another world was stirring. One morning, Adrian's legal advisor, Laura, stormed into his office on the 29th floor. Her face was tense. She tossed a newspaper onto his desk. The headline screamed, "Millionaire caught playing savior in public hospital." Beneath it, blurry photographs showed Adrian walking beside Lucia, carrying a box of supplies. Another shot caught him entering Mariana's room. They're saying you're staging this, Laura said firmly, that you're using a sick woman and her child to repair your reputation after the mining scandal. Adrian scanned the page, then pushed it aside. Let them say it. You can't ignore this. Investors are calling. The board wants answers. Adrian leaned back, his jaw tightening. If they want to know why I'm helping a dying woman and her daughter, tell them the truth. Laura exhaled sharply. Adrian, this isn't charity. This is war. Your position, your image, everything is on the line. He stood slowly, crossing to the window. Below, the city pulsed with neon and horns, indifferent to human suffering. Then maybe it's time I stopped caring about image. When he returned to the hospital that evening, Lucia noticed the shadow in his face. Bad day? She asked. He forced a smile. Just noise. She studied him carefully, then handed him a piece of paper. It was another drawing, this time of him standing between her and her mother, both women holding his hands. At the bottom, she had written in shaky letters, "Family." Adrian stared at the drawing, the weight of its meaning pressing against the storm of his corporate world. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just helping them survive. They were helping him live, but the outside world wasn't going to let him keep this new life in peace. The first phone call came from an old partner, then another from the press. Rumors spread like wildfire. Adrian Vega, once untouchable, was now entangled with a charity case. And as the whispers grew louder, Adrian knew he was standing at a crossroads. He could walk away, protect his empire, and let Lucia's story fade into another forgotten tragedy. Or he could stay, fight, and risk losing everything he had built. That night, sitting beside Lucia as she drifted to sleep in her hospital bed, Adrian whispered to himself words he hadn't dared speak before. I think I already made my choice. The boardroom was colder than any hospital room. Glass walls reflected the city skyline, but inside, the long table glowed with tension. 11 directors sat in tailored suits, their eyes sharp as knives. Adrian, began Victor Salgado, an old partner with a silver beard and sharper tongue. This situation, it's hurting the company. Adrian leaned back in his chair, hands folded. What situation? Victor slid a tabloid across the table. The headline, Billionaire turned street hero, savior or scam. Underneath, photos of Adrian holding Lucia's hand. You've been seen in that hospital almost daily, with a child, with her mother. People are talking. Investors are nervous. They think you're unstable. Unstable? Adrian's voice was low, steady. For helping a dying woman breathe? Another director, a woman in pearls, cut in. This isn't about morality, Adrian. It's about perception. Perception drives markets. If you look reckless, our clients lose faith. Adrian stood, slowly, deliberately. He placed his hands on the polished wood. I've spent 20 years building numbers for men who never cared about lives behind them. I've done everything you asked, but now, for the first time, I'm doing something that matters. And you call it reckless? The room buzzed with whispers. Victor's jaw tightened. If you don't distance yourself from this family immediately, we'll have no choice but to remove you. Adrian looked at each face, one by one, and saw nothing but fear disguised as reason. Then he reached into his briefcase, pulled out a document, and signed it in silence. What's that? Victor demanded. My resignation, Adrian said. His voice didn't waver. Effective now. The room erupted. Voices clashed, chairs scraped. But Adrian didn't wait. He left the folder on the table and walked out. In the elevator, descending from the 29th floor, his chest felt lighter than it had in years. He wasn't CEO anymore. He wasn't chained to a board of directors or quarterly reports. He was free. That night he returned to the hospital. Lucia ran to him, waving another drawing. It showed him in the casual clothes, not a suit. You don't look like a boss here, she said. Adrian knelt, smiling faintly. That's because I'm not one anymore. Lucia tilted her head. Then what are you? He thought for a moment, then answered, maybe just someone who finally knows what matters. Days turned into weeks. Adrian used his fortune to rent a large building on the south side of the city. With a team of volunteers, he began transforming it into a shelter for mothers and children with nowhere else to go. Beds replaced empty offices, kitchens replaced boardrooms. Murals painted by local artists covered cold gray walls with color. He named it Haven 1. The media caught wind quickly. Cameras camped outside. Reporters shouted questions. Some called him a saint, others a fraud. One headline read, "From Shark to Martyr, Vega's Redemption Show." Adrian ignored it all. But inside the shelter, Lucia watched with wide eyes as rooms filled with toys, as mothers carried babies into safety, as laughter replaced silence. For the first time, she ran through a hallway, not in fear, but in joy. "You built this?" she asked, tugging his sleeve. "For you, for your mom, for everyone like you." Her eyes sparkled. "Then you're my hero." The word struck him deeper than any stock crash, deeper than any market collapse. Hero. A word he never thought would belong to him. But outside those walls, enemies were gathering. Former partners whispered of betrayal. Old allies painted him as dangerous, unstable, unpredictable. And one night, when Adrian was hammering shelves in Haven 1, a message buzzed his phone. "Journalists are outside the hospital. They're looking for the girl." The hammer slipped from his hand. His heart stopped. For the first time since he began this journey, fear returned. Not for himself, but for Lucia. He grabbed his coat and ran into the night. When Adrian reached the hospital, the scene chilled him. Lucia was in the corridor, her small shoulders shaking, while a nurse tried to calm her down. "They tried to get in," the nurse explained, her voice tense. "Reporters. They wanted photos. They said terrible things, that you were dangerous, that her mother was exploiting you." Lucia looked up at him, eyes red, cheeks wet. "They said you'll leave us, that all this is just for show." Adrian knelt, cupping her face with steady hands. "Listen to me. No one will separate us. Not now, not ever." But he could see the fear had already carved itself into her. Not fear of him, fear of a world too cruel, too loud, too suspicious. That night, as Mariana slept, she asked him to step aside. "Adrian," she said, her voice weak but clear, "I'm grateful. You've saved me, saved my daughter, but is this safe for her? She's just a little girl." Adrian lowered his head. "I'll protect her. Protect her even from you, if it comes to that," Mariana whispered. "Don't let her become a weapon in anyone's war." Her words stayed with him, heavy as lead. At dawn, Lucia was gone. The hospital staff searched every hallway, every garden, every corner. Adrian's heart pounded as he ran through stairwells, calling her name. Then someone mentioned a clue. A neighbor had seen a small figure walking toward an old rail yard. Adrian knew instantly where she had gone. The van. He drove like a man possessed, rain slashing against the windshield. When he reached the lot, he saw her, curled on the same filthy mattress where he'd first found her, arms wrapped around her knees. "Lucia!" he shouted, breathless, stumbling toward her. She didn't move at first. Then, in a broken whisper, "I thought you'd leave us too." Adrian fell to his knees in the mud. "Why would you think that?" "Because everyone says rich men don't stay, that you'll get bored, that you'll walk away." His chest ached. He wanted to tear the voices of the world out of her mind, but all he had were words. "Lucia," he said softly, "when you were younger, did you like stories?" She nodded, timid. "In stories, heroes make mistakes. They get scared. They lose their way. But true heroes—" He paused, swallowing. "True heroes never abandon the people they love." Her eyes lifted, shimmering through tears. "Are you my hero?" "Only if you want me to be. Then never leave me again." "Never again," he vowed, wrapping her in an embrace that defied the cold, the rain, the doubts of the entire world. From that night forward, their bond was sealed. Weeks passed. Mariana grew stronger, walking short distances without oxygen. Adrian moved them both into Haven 1, giving them rooms side by side. Lucia began attending lessons organized by volunteers. She wore a second-hand uniform with pride, scribbling answers in a notebook as if knowledge were treasure. Every evening Adrian was there, helping with homework, telling stories, even laughing over silly board games. But beyond the shelter's walls, criticism only sharpened. Newspapers called him unstable, opportunistic, even dangerous. Former colleagues painted him as a fallen tycoon seeking absolution. He ignored them. Instead, he poured millions into Haven 1, then Haven 2 in another city, then Haven 3. Each building opened its doors to mothers and children who had nowhere else to turn. Inside, there were no cameras, no speeches, no staged photo ops, only safety. Yet, for all the progress, Adrian knew enemies were circling. Old allies had lost patience. Investors whispered of revenge. They wanted him discredited, ruined. One night, while walking through the halls of Haven 1, Lucia slipped her hand into his. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "What? Giving up everything? The suits, the cars, the fancy office." Adrian smiled faintly. "Those things were never mine, not really. But you and your mom, you're mine if you'll have me." Lucia squeezed his hand. "Then I'm yours." And in that simple promise, Adrian Vega knew the empire he had lost was nothing compared to the family he had found. The night after Lucia returned from the van, Adrian barely slept. He sat in a chair outside her new room at Haven 1, watching the hallway shadows stretch and shift. Every creak of the floor made him glance at the door, terrified she might vanish again. By morning, when Lucia emerged rubbing her eyes, he was still there. "You stayed all night?" she asked, surprised. Adrian nodded. "To make sure you knew I wasn't going anywhere." She blinked, then smiled faintly. "Then maybe I can believe you." From that day forward, their bond deepened. Lucia clung to his side as if testing him, waiting to see if he would falter. He never did. Whether it was breakfast in the shelter cafeteria, walks in the small courtyard, or quiet evenings reading together, Adrian was constant. Mariana noticed the change too. Sitting in her wheelchair in the garden one afternoon, she told him softly, "You're becoming the father she never had." Adrian's throat tightened. "Do you think she wants that?" Mariana's gaze lingered on her daughter, who was laughing with other children by the swings. "I think she already decided." The realization shook him more than any corporate collapse ever had. One weekend, Adrian surprised Lucia with a trip to a bookstore. Her eyes lit up as she wandered through rows of novels, tracing spines with reverent fingers. She chose a single book, an illustrated collection of fairy tales. "Why this one?" he asked. "Because in stories," she explained, hugging the book, "heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just stay." Her words nearly broke him. A few days later, at the hospital for Mariana's final checkup, Lucia sat in the waiting room drawing. When Adrian leaned over, he froze. The picture showed 3 figures beneath a tree labeled family. A woman, a little girl, and a man with no tie, smiling wide. "Is that me?" he asked. Lucia nodded without hesitation. "Yes, that's you. But not the man from the black car, the other one, the one who stayed." Adrian swallowed hard. "And what am I to you now?" She set her pencil down and met his eyes. "My dad, if you want to be." The words silenced the world around him. He reached out, brushing her hair back gently. "I want that more than anything." When Mariana emerged from the doctor's office, breathing steadier, she found them sitting together, Lucia leaning against Adrian's arm like she had always belonged there. That evening, back at Haven 1, children filled the hallways with laughter. Adrian walked with Lucia through the shelter, showing her a newly finished classroom with desks and bright murals. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's yours," he replied. "All of this is for you, for every child who needs it." She slipped her small hand into his. "Then we'll take care of it together." For Adrian, the words sealed something permanent. He no longer saw Lucia as just a child he had rescued, or Mariana as just a patient he had helped. He saw them as his family, chosen not by blood, but by love. That night, before bed, Lucia peeked into his room. "Good night, Dad," she said softly. Adrian froze, then smiled with a tenderness he hadn't felt in years. "Good night, sweetheart." He turned off the light with tears in his eyes, whispering into the darkness, "Never again will I fail the people I love." For the first time in his life, Adrian Vega was not alone. He was a father, and nothing in the world, no fortune, no scandal, no storm, could take that away. 3 months later, Haven 1 overflowed with life. The building that once smelled of dust and abandonment now rang with children's laughter, the aroma of warm meals, and voices filled with hope. Walls that had been gray were alive with colors, murals painted by the same children who slept safely inside. Adrian walked the hallways not as a tycoon, not as a savior, but as a father, Every child greeted him with smiles, and every mother whispered thanks. Yet for him, gratitude was unnecessary. The true gift was in watching Lucia run through the corridors, her hair flying, her laughter echoing like sunlight. Mariana, stronger now, volunteered at the shelter, guiding new families as if she had always been part of its foundation. Her illness hadn't disappeared, but treatment gave her back strength, and Adrian ensured she lacked nothing. One afternoon, as they gathered in the courtyard, Lucia tugged his hand. "Come see." She led him to a mural freshly painted on the outer wall. It showed a man holding hands with a woman and a little girl, surrounded by dozens of smiling figures. Above it, in bright letters, was written, "Home is not a place, it's people." Adrian felt his throat tighten. "Did you make this?" Lucia nodded proudly. "All of us did. It's our story." He crouched to meet her eyes. "And what am I in your story?" She grinned. "My dad, forever." The words settled in his soul like a final puzzle piece he'd been searching for all his life. He pulled her into an embrace, the kind that erases all doubts, all shadows of loneliness. That evening, Haven 1 celebrated its official opening. No journalists, no flashing cameras, just families, volunteers, and a simple meal shared in joy. Adrian stood at the back, watching mothers laugh as children chased balloons, watching Mariana sit surrounded by friends, watching Lucia beam under the glow of lanterns. For the first time in his life, Adrian Vega realized he was truly wealthy. Not in dollars, not in stock shares, but in love, in belonging, in purpose. He had lost an empire, yes, but he had gained something greater, a family and a legacy that would outlive him. Later, as the celebration quieted and stars scattered the night sky, Lucia leaned against his side. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "What? The big office, the cars, the money?" Adrian smiled, gazing at the stars. "I thought I would, but looking at you, looking at this place, I don't miss a thing." Lucia closed her eyes, content. "Good, because we need you here." He kissed the top of her head. "And here I'll stay." The night air carried their laughter upward, and Adrian knew with unshakable certainty. This was the life he was meant to live. If you're still here reading this, ask yourself one question. Would you give up everything you own, your comfort, your fortune, your reputation, just to save one life? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters.